Well, meanwhile, Democrats are not polling well at all. Recent polling from NBC and Fox News had the Democrats reaching an all-time low. I want to get your thoughts on why that could be in a moment, but I want to talk to you about this bizarre new strategy that they're putting in place. We know that the Democrats know how to waste money. We saw that in the election campaign last year, where Kamala Harris blew more than $1 billion in a few months for what was essentially a disastrous election campaign. But just when you thought that, they couldn't waste any more money, or what they spend money on couldn't be more ridiculous, the Democrats are spending $20 million on a study examining how to speak to American men. The New York Times reports that their $20 million project, Speaking with American Men, a strategic plan, will look at the language and content that gains the attention of male voters. So this, of course, comes after their brutal election loss, where 53% of men aged between 18 and 44 supported Donald Trump. So, Brent, what's your assessment of this $20 million on learning how to speak to men? Is that really going to help them?
Well, first off, I would like to offer for only $10 million a study in how to understand people who watch The View. And that probably will turn out about as well as this $20 million studying how to speak to men. But no joke, there was actually a study done a couple of years ago about testosterone levels in men and how that affected their political views. And so this must be low testosterone men trying to figure out how to speak to men with normal and high testosterone. But really what it comes down to is that Democrats are now the party of the coastal elites, and these folks have no clue how to talk to normal folks. And so they're trying to throw money at the problem as opposed to looking internally and saying, what have we done and said, and what positions have we taken that have made normal people, male and female, both turn away from the left, not even the center left anymore, but the left parties of the U.S. and around the world, because they just do not understand normal folks anymore. They've never run into a normal person in their everyday life.
And the Democrats, they're right now searching for a new leader. They've been trying to rebrand for some time, and they really haven't been able to gain momentum. Do you see them turning this around at some point? It looks pretty grim.
Well, it's really hard to be the party out of power when your opposing party has such a strong leader like the Republicans have in Donald Trump. I mean, I remember back to the Obama days, once he took power in 2009, that it wasn't really until the Tea Party movement came around after Obamacare was pushed out and some of the planned changes to the tax laws. But even then, we didn't have a leader. We just had a movement that was asking for a leader. And so far, the left hasn't even found its movement. And without that, they can't find their leader. We recently did a study where we looked at and asked voters who the head of the Democratic Party is and listed out about 10 to 12 options. And not even the Democrats could come up with an answer over 20% of who the own leader of their party was.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, certainly the number one question that Americans were thinking while Joe Biden was in office was who is actually running the country? And now a bombshell video has emerged of the Democratic National Committee's Vice Chair David Hogg admitting who actually ran the 2024 race behind the scenes.
Foundational question for me is how corrupt is the DNC if so many people knew, or few people knew about Biden, well, the president of the United States?
I mean, I think the fact of the matter is the DNC is always going to be a campaign arm of the president, ultimately. The bigger issue was the inner circle that was around Biden. That's it.
And I can't stress you enough.
Joe Biden's chief of staff, had an enormous amount of power.
Joe Biden?
Joe Biden's chief of staff.
That was an open secret at the left. I would avoid him. He was scary.
So that was secretly recorded and then published by Project Veritas. And there we have it. He's admitting that Jill Biden's chief of staff, Anthony Bernal, had enormous power. And this comes after Jake Tapper's book, Original Sin, revealed that former President Joe Biden's aides considered Jill Biden one of the most powerful first ladies in history, which made her top aide, Anthony Bernal, one of the most influential people in the White House. What's your assessment of this? How damning is this for Jill Biden?
The only people who finally realized that Joe Biden was not actually in charge of this country for the last 4 years is the media. And I don't know if they were complicit in hiding it, but at minimum, they were incompetent in not seeing it, because Americans realize this. That is why Joe Biden's image was so bad. That is why the direction of the country was so poor, is because Americans actually knew what was going on because they saw it with their own eyes, and then they realized the consequences of it. And for those of you who ever want to come to the United States, if you ever go to a barbecue joint that has a ceiling and a backdrop like that, you have found the right barbecue place. Wherever they had dinner with a Project Veritas and David Hogg, that's where you want to go find American barbecue.
Finally, the Trump administration is cutting federal contracts with Harvard University, intensifying the president's clash with the nation's oldest and wealthiest university. Now, Donald Trump is talking about giving the money that was going to Harvard to trade schools.
They're taking $5 billion, and I'd rather see that money go to trade schools. And by the way, they're totally anti-Semitic at Harvard, as you know, and some other colleges, too, in all fairness to them. And it's been exposed, very exposed. And I think they're dealing very badly. Every time they fight, they lose another $250 million. Yesterday, we found another $100 million. And they have, they have a fund, an endowment, $52 billion. All right? They get a lot of that from the United States. And I think it's ridiculous.
It's an interesting argument. Should this money go, towards trade schools instead of funding woke Harvard? Is this going to win Donald Trump political points?
If you look at what's happened in American politics in the last 20 years, it's really been driven by what we call the diploma divide. So if you're not college educated, 20 years ago, you were more likely to be a Democrat, and now today you're more likely to be a Republican. When we just finished an exit study of the US election, we found that folks who came out for the first time to vote for Donald Trump, which means they'd skipped 2020 or they weren't registered in 2020 and did not participate, 80% of them did not have a college degree. And then when you look at the folks who flipped from Biden in 2020 to Trump in 2024, you are much more likely to be non-college educated. The base of the Republican Party is not college educated. There's a couple of reasons for that. One is cost, because going to a university now is so expensive. Two, they walk out of there with degrees that now AI can do in the next 5 minutes instead of them that they spent 5 years getting a degree for. And it's really all driven by the fact that going to college used to be the common sense thing, and now it takes your common sense out of you. And Donald Trump is attacking Harvard. One, because there's no reason for us to be giving universities that much money. But two, because that is no longer the base of the Republican Party. And Donald Trump has always been a leader in figuring out where's the Republican Party headed, and he drives them there. And much of this is from the diploma divide.
Yeah, it's interesting. Brent Buchanan, GOP pollster and messaging strategist, thank you so much for your time and joining us on Power Hour.